something that I think is really profoundly important about what you're talking about this idea of developing compassion for yourself is, I think a part of the journey, certainly for me, and I know for others, my close friend Melissa helped me realize, maybe it was 2 years ago now, that she said to me, because this was early on my journey of really getting in touch with some of the traumas in my life and how they were impacting me. And she shared with me, she was like, I know, for me, and she said, and I hope for you, Jared, that you begin to talk about these things not as like, these are the things that like messed me up, but like, these are the things that I survived and that have made me like the strong, like sensitive, like caring person that I am today, right? And I think that's the reintegration idea. That's the like sort of making friends with those parts of yourself instead of like, I hate that part of myself, right? And like, it's so easy to do it in another person. Like when I hear you talk about jumping into bushes and arm wrestling guys and stuff, but that seems like a young woman trying to find her voice and her sense of independence, and it seems so like healthy and not at all something to be ashamed of or hypercritical of. But yet,
maybe
I have
like people.
Well, but I mean that's how we learned things.
It was funny.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody.
But I think that's some of the journey, right? And so, like, in terms of treatments, like relationships are a huge part of healing from trauma.
Yeah.
Like a big part of what needs to be recalibrated, and what we all need to survive and be healthy is attunement, synchronicity, like synchrony with others. And so that's how therapy works, right? Is that you experience a relationship sustained over time where your stuff can come up and the other person is trained and able to react in a healthy way. Like you relearn like healthy boundaries in a relationship and stuff like that. That's also where, to anybody out there who's been offered the opportunity to be part of a mutual support group or be part of a therapy group, I get it. To anyone that sounds like the worst thing in the world, like it's scary or whatever, but it's like the power of the, so people get scared of and hate and avoid group therapy just on the face of it, but sharing with others the things that you think will make people think that you're crazy, or will make them judge you, or will make them like recoil in disgust. Like if you're in a safe situation and you can share those things, and that what happens is that others respond with caring and empathy, or they say, I do that too. Like there's nothing more powerful and healing than that, right? You talked about EMDR, right? Because that's a lot of how it's centered in the body. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so there's sort of light, there's techniques that use light in your eyes, there's tapping techniques, there's a lot of different techniques. But if you feel like you have trauma, finding a therapist that's really trained and experienced in EMDR.
And that is not this woo-woo,
nope.
Like, it's not
hypnotism.
Thank you.
Hypnotization.
It's scientifically proven.
Evidence-based is one of the best evidence-based.
So, anyway, keep going.
There are medications, right? Like some people do well on SSRIs and things like Xanax, but although in the book, Van Kolk talks about, with his patients, he's wary of, because a lot of traumatized people really like Xanax and other benzos because it allows them to numb them out, right? Yeah. MDMA is actually showing up as a really interesting
I've heard
treatment.
Of that.
Yeah, so there's emerging research on that. So there's also a lot of bottom-up treatments where you start from the body. So a lot of yoga, movement, really getting reconnected to, and actually you know, one of my exes who like, you know, did her yoga teacher training in kind of like trauma informed yoga teaching and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's actually something that I would like to work for. I mean, I know through yoga medicine, the program that I have my training through, I believe they have some online yoga for trauma courses. So I should look into that, and you know, I can let you guys know if I do any online like yoga for trauma.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah. Because it's very powerful. I mean, even if you didn't do a specific yoga for trauma class, restorative yoga, yin, meditation, all of that teaches your nervous system to calm. Right? And when your nervous system starts to relax, then your body can heal and it can rest and it can leave the fight or flight stage.
Yes.
So anyway.
Well, it's so interesting, right? Because I think in yoga also you learn this way of sort of like working hard, right? Like sometimes you get to a place in a class where you're exerting yourself and it's difficult and you're sweating. But part of the teaching in yoga is like, don't push yourself farther than you can maintain your breath, than you can maintain like a calm mind, right? And so it kind of teaches you like, get into some difficulty without like gritting your teeth and like, you know, like tensing all up and stuff. And I think that movement is really helpful.
Yeah, I always say to my students when we're doing challenging asana, so asana would be movement, how can you allow yourself to be in sensation and stay calm? Yeah. And that's kind of the idea, is sensation is fleeting, right? So when we have these triggers and we go through this trauma, it's fleeting. You know, well, maybe not for everybody, but hopefully it will pass at some point. And so it's training your body and training your mind to be calm and to be able to be still in really tough moments.
Yes, exactly. Right. So the other cool thing is like there's a lot of traumatized folks, and there's some research around this, that are helped by theater and improv and dance, right? Because again, going back,
stand up.
I don't know. So the theater and improv and dance piece, right? And even this is true for yoga too. Is again, that goes back to the relationship part, right? When you're improving with someone, you have to, you know, it's a stressful situation when you're like up on a stage.
Well, that's true. But maybe that was the worst suggestion ever.
No. But you have to. But on improv, right, where that aligns with trauma therapy is like you have to be in the moment and attuned with the person you're with. And like dance is a very, not only is it embodied, you know, which by itself is part of the reintegration experience, but doing that in synchrony with a partner and being attuned to another person, right? Like that gets at that like sort of numbness and cutoff thing too, right? And so there's cool programs where they have, you know, people in prisons like doing Shakespeare, you know,
that's so
and
cool.
like and there's you know, I have a really funny story about this, like with a person I was with a couple years ago. You know how you have like those like silly stupid things that you just stumble onto with someone you're dating.
Sure.
It becomes like a stupid thing.
Like a thing.
Yeah.
That nobody else would think was funny.
Yeah. So we used to do this thing where we would like, we both could like intentionally like flare our nostrils. Like, can you do that? Like, wait, I'm gonna try to do it. Like,
you're totally doing it. Am I doing it?
Yeah. So. So we used to do this thing where we would like, you know, when you're like laying in bed or whatever, being goofy and like, you know, you're kind of like looking over at each other. We would just like sort of like do that to each other. And it wasn't until like a year or two later that I read this book, because the practice of doing that felt very like connecting and like reassuring to me. And I'm like, oh yeah, because that's exactly what we were doing, is like that like eye contact, that like body movement synchronization, right? It was like a like, okay, like you're here, this other person's here, like you're safe, you know, like
it was like you were dancing with your noses.
Yeah, exactly.